A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, actually in 1964 when I was a 13-year-old student at Grove Park Grammar School in Wrexham in North Wales, I was just like every other school in the UK. There were mandatory courses. We had to learn math and English and a foreign language. They were the main ones. And in many schools in England and Scotland, religious instruction was optional. In Wales, it was mandatory. We had to attend religious instruction classes, like it or not. I liked it because I was raised a Christian. Our religious instruction teacher was a Church of England vicar, a lowly prelate. He taught us the Bible. I should say he taught us parts of the Bible, the parts he wanted us to learn about. The fall of man, Adam and Eve, Noah's flood, the Exodus, the conquest of the Promised Land, the miracles of Jesus, the crucifixion and the resurrection. Nothing, not one word about treating the females as second-class people, slavery, genocide, rape, death for working on the Sabbath and other unsavoury things found in the Bible. That teacher decided that he would bring in clergy from other denominations and religions to talk to us about their version of God. We had Baptists and Pentecostals, Presbyterians, Methodists, Hindu swamis, Muslim imams, Buddhist priests, all fascinating stuff. And I'm certain that the RI teacher that we had was convinced that we would listen to all of them and realise naturally that the Church of England was the one true religion worshipping the one true God. We also had an English teacher, Mr. Blackwell, who was the greatest influence in my academic life and one of the greatest in my entire life. He taught me to read and write poetry, but most importantly, as a result of his teaching, I love the English language. I went on to get a master's degree as a direct result of the work. My minor during the study for that degree was Middle Eastern religions. The other thing Mr. Blackwell taught us was to think critically, to have an open mind and to never accept a claim of authority, including his authority over me as a teacher. Back in the RI class, in those classes I started to read the Bible, all of it. As I read it, I did so with an open mind, not accepting it as the word of God just because our RI teacher had said it was. Instead, I read it as though it was a genuine history book, a scientific book with claims that were both historical and scientific. I didn't have the resources to check all the historical claims, so I put them on the back burner, but we had a great science department at that school and science teachers who were also very happy to spend time with the students answering questions after hours, even if those questions weren't related to the actual topics. I made the most of their willingness to engage that way with the students and bombarded them with questions based on what I was reading in the Bible. For example, what was the order of the creation of the universe? I use the word creation because I was a believer at that time. Was light really created before there were stars, including our sun? Did Adam and Eve really exist? Could serpents once talk? Was there a garden? Where was the Garden of Eden, the land of Nod, Shinar, etc.? Could somebody really part the Red Sea? And many other questions just like that. Their answers moved me further down the road of skepticism. I started to ask my RI teacher questions. Questions it turned out he was really uncomfortable answering, such as, why did God kill all the firstborn children of Egypt? If Pharaoh wouldn't let the Hebrews go, why not just kill Pharaoh? Why did the Hebrews wander around the desert for 40 years when they could have walked to the Promised Land in 3 or 4 weeks? How could a man like Joshua command the sun to stop still? Why did God condone slavery as he does in Exodus 21? Why were there different versions of the 10 Commandments, 2 of which are in Exodus? That's Exodus 20 and Exodus 34. And questions similar to that. When I started asking questions on what I was reading in Leviticus, he was most uncomfortable of all. I asked questions such as, was it right to kill your son for being disobedient? Was it right to kill someone for working on the Sabbath? Was it right to kill homosexuals? And was it wrong to eat pork or shrimp? The science teachers gave me answers that made sense, since they never required the invocation of magic, which the Christians call miracles. The RI teachers' answers were vague, faltering, illogical, loaded with fallacious arguments, unconvincing and, I came to conclude, unethical and immoral. By the time I was finished with Leviticus, I was almost convinced that the whole story was nothing more than an ancient attempt by pre-scientific people trying to explain the world in which they lived. Reading the so-called prophecies and applying the critical thinking skills I learned, I asked myself if these prophecies were truly prophetic. When I thought about what I believe a prophecy should look like, I concluded that there are no genuine prophecies in the Bible. To me, a prophecy should be specific. It should have a definite time frame for completion. It should not be something mundane, and it should not be something that people could work towards achieving. An example of what I think a prophecy would look like is this. Before the end of November, in the year 1963, the president of a country called the United States of America will be shot dead by a man called Lee Harvey Oswald using a rifle. It's specific, has a time frame of completion, and is not mundane. It's something that people could, and did, work towards achieving, but imagine if that had appeared in the Bible. If it had, I'd agree that the author was a prophet, because the year 1963 would have been meaningless to him. He could not have known that the USA would become a country, and he would have no idea of what a rifle is. Instead of truly prophetic statements fitting those criteria above, we get, "A maiden shall give birth to a child, and she'll call him Emmanuel." It is not specific. There's no time frame, and it is tediously mundane. Women give birth to children all the time. The word used in that prophecy is Alma. It means maiden, not virgin. The author also got the name wrong. If the statement had read something like, "In 475 years, a virgin named Mary shall be visited by God, who will impregnate her. She will give birth to a boy who will be named Jesus, who will go on to do great things, but he'll be killed when he is 33 years old and will be resurrected 3 days later." That would have been prophetic. All the way through reading the Bible, I spotted absurdities such as talking snakes and donkeys, filling a barge that had no propulsion or method of steering with 2 or 7 of every kind of animal. Atrocities such as the slaughter of the Midianites, except for the virgin girls who were to be taken as sexual slaves. The global genocide that was described in Genesis 6 to 9, that's the flood of Noah. And contradictions such as the differing number of women turning up at the tomb, or what day the crucifixion took place on. The day of the Passover or the day before. When I finished reading the book of Revelation, my immediate thought was that the author had discovered LSD 2,000 years before the rest of the world. I've always been an avid reader, so I started reading up on the history of Christianity and ancient Judaism. What I learned from that study, my science teachers, the absurdities, contradictions and atrocities, convinced me 100% that the whole story was nothing more than a fantasy concocted by semi-literate, pre-scientific people attempting to explain the world in which they found themselves. My studies on the history of Christianity and Judaism and my study of Middle Eastern religions further cemented that conviction. In the many decades since then, I've debated the topic countless times with many Jews, Christians, and lately Muslims. In all that time, I've heard the same old arguments for God, the same tired old arguments, with the same fallacious reasoning over and over and over again. For example, look at the trees. I feel it in my heart. I've heard the transcendental argument for God countless times, the cosmological argument for God countless times. I feel it in my heart. I just repeated myself. You secretly know God exists, but you just want to sin. Pascal's wager. It's better to believe in a God than not, because what if you're wrong? And my favourite is, you'll find out when you're dead. You won't find out anything when you're dead, because you'll be dead. It would be wrong of me to criticise those ancient people for getting the whole story wrong. After all, they didn't have access to the vast amount of knowledge available to everyone alive today who has a cell phone. They had, they had no way of knowing the truth, so they did their best that they could to explain the world in which they found themselves. That they got it wrong, so wrong, is understandable and therefore forgivable. No person who has access to a cell phone has any such excuse to believe the creation and other stories in the Bible. Within seconds you can find out how such things as planets and stars and planets form, how plants and animals evolve over time, and how we know that the flood of Noah not only didn't happen, but why we know it couldn't have happened. The ignorance of people today who believe that the Bible is historically or scientifically accurate is willful, because they choose to ignore the facts about reality that have been provided by science over the past few hundred years. Willful ignorance is, in my opinion, unforgivable. I'm going to end with a couple of questions to believers. Why do you believe God is real? And the second question, can you provide one piece of information that is demonstrably true and that points to one and only one conclusion, namely that God is real? Based on 60 years of experience, I expect the answer to be crickets. Add that fact in the comments below, and if it's demonstrably true, I guarantee that I'll share it with everyone and anyone that I know who doesn't believe in gods. If you like what I have to say, please hit like, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Comments, positive and negative, are welcome. Add them below and I'll do my best to respond. Thank you.